Hey Ryan, I'm doing pretty good. And yourself?
I'm pretty good actually. Feeling pretty good. Feeling pretty good about things. It's a little it's a little slow at work. I'm sure as you know, January and February, even if it's not COVID or a pandemic, is always slow for hospitality after the holidays. People are um, perhaps they've overextended themselves financially or would like to get caught up. Either one is fine, right? It's the holidays. We all do it. Some of us or they're just tired, right? It's because November and December are just long stretches for anybody, right? Thanksgiving, Christmas, mentally, physically, you're going here, you're going there, you're trying to keep up with life. It's a lot, I'm sure, as you know.
Yes, it is.
So
I agree.
we're enjoying the downtime in banquets, but it's not too down. Like it's down enough where you can breathe, but you can't take off either, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's the cycles, It's good
Yeah,
to have down cycles sometimes, so you can rest up, recharge your batteries.
it's super important. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I, I used to we used to have this discussion in New York City, a few of me and my peers, because there was actually a stretch where, in order to keep up with business needs, actually, as we're talking about it, it was around November, December. In some cases, we had to split our days off, but we ended up talking about how you're off, right? And you think for a second mentally, oh, it's okay, I'm going to be off, and then another 3 days I'll be off, so I don't have to work 5 days. But then we were talking about if you have 2 days off in a row, that first day is like the laundry or the dry cleaner or the chores, and the second day is like the recharge. But if you just have that one day where you're getting caught up, you never get recharged. And I didn't realize the importance of actually having that slow time until I was in New York.
Yeah, that's why I liked a 4-day week because you have that Friday, if it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you have that Friday to kind of get caught up, but it was almost like you had a day to waste.
Yeah,
Because when it's 2 days, okay, so your first day off, but then the next day, oh, I got to go to work tomorrow. So when you don't have to go to work tomorrow, because you got those 3 days off, that was real nice. But that was before my girls came. Um, you know, once they were born, forget that.
yeah.
I no more 4-day work weeks.
Yeah. So I have something I want to talk to you about, but on that note, I was actually thinking about this more like in November, December when it was really busy at work. And to me, it is in some cases in some cases spending time with your kids might feel like a workout. And I don't mean that like how do I say this? It's something you need to do or should do for their mental health and emotional health and yours as well, right?
Right.
But some days you can't bring yourself to do it effectively, if that makes sense. So one night I it was like a Sunday and it had been just 2 weeks nonstop turning and burning at work, and Jade wanted to play, and I was like, I really, really had to bring myself to do it. And we were running around, and I was tired and not focusing, still kind of mentally still at work. And I tripped and I fell, like just missed James, but then he started crying, and I was like, "Ugh," and just like walked away, right? But then at that moment, I realized that it might be best for me to tell Jade or James or Axe or Alexis or even Monica or whomever else within my circle, tonight's not a good night to do that. Let's make some time tomorrow if the time's available. But I just felt like I had pushed myself too far mentally, and I had got upset about something that wasn't that big of a deal. But now I kind of strategize it better, if that makes sense. So if it's a day where it was a long day and what Jade wants to do is run around or play hide and seek, I look for an alternative, if that makes sense. Like, why don't we color? Or why don't we watch a movie or something that's more my pace that we can do it together, whether it be hugging and snuggling or whatever. Um, but I set a boundary, if you will, so that I don't overfill my cup, if that makes sense.
Well, boundaries are important, um, but you know, it's important if you're going to say not now, as best you can, that you let them know when.
Right, exactly.
Um, because if you just say not now, they don't know when the next opportunity will be. It can be devastating. But you know, I just to this day I still have a vivid memory of when my dad would come home from work, and he was electrician, so he was tired, and he's
Physical job.
out in the cold and things or whatever, and when I wanted to play and he didn't want to, I remember it was devastating,
Right. Oh yeah,
at
totally.
that young age, because I so looked forward to playing with him. And, I was like counting on it. It's like I get home from school before him, and I'm waiting and waiting. I got those positive fantasies. And then when he came home and he wasn't able to do it, um, it was tough to deal with that young mentality. But, um, you know, if we really are tired, we need to let them know. But, I try to, if my kids are asking, mine are a little older than yours, and if they're asking, not Alexis, but, older than Jade and your twins,
Yeah. Yeah.
I try to, make the time, because so often I'm working and I can't, and they just, are you working tonight, Daddy? Yeah. Oh,
I
you
know.
know, and so it's a balancing act, and you got to respect yourself, and you have to respect them, and and sometimes everybody's not going to get what they want.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I've implemented, if you will, is I'll look at the clock and say, "All right, give me 5 minutes," but I mean 5 minutes, right, to myself and to them, and then I'll give them a burst of wrestling or hide and seek or whatever it may be for a solid like 10 or 15 minutes, right? And me again referring to playtime as a workout. But on those longer days, you know what I mean? Where, like you said, because I know that that's important, and I understand, when she's like, "Dad, come play with us," you know what I mean? Like she really means that, and I know they do too. Um, so I give it that burst, if you will, and then I'm like, okay, let's watch TV or something for a little bit, or let's color. But you know what I mean? Because I think, and maybe you concur, they at that age they really look forward to the physical aspect of whether it be wrestling or tag or whatever the case may be, and especially during these winter days, like Monica always makes a good point. It's harder to break it up, right? It's kind of just the setting may still be the living room, like the last few weeks where it's just brutally cold or snowing.
Yeah. Well, you try to give them what you can, and um, you know, mine are growing out of that, the physical things.
Hmm.
They want to do things, and um, so it's just, you got to play it by ear, but it's we need to make time for our children. They need that. Plus,
Yeah,
it's rewarding to me when ever I'm able to do it, and so and with
yeah,
me working a lot of evenings, I miss out a lot. That's why when they were going to school virtually, I was actually loving it. They happened to be able to do well too. They weren't some of the kids that were getting left behind. They were able to do their work, and they did well. But I got to see them more during the day when I wasn't working, even though they were in school. When they broke for lunch or here or there, I got to interact with them. And now when they're in school, I take them to school. I pick them up from school, and then after I pick them up, then I'm getting ready to go to work. Although the good thing is I'm doing things virtually still, so I don't have to leave even earlier and drive to work.
that commute makes it. Any commute makes a. That's it's time consuming. That you gotta really, you lose time in the day or the evening or whatever the case may be. Um, but like you said, it's definitely a balancing act, right? And I talk to Monica about this all the time. And in this day and age, I know you don't float social media like I do, but a lot of parents share memes, if you will, and they're talking about, like, for an example, one of the memes might say, "So I'm supposed to hold down a full time job, work out, be healthy, play with my kids, do homework, spend time with my partner, and still keep my sanity." Got it. Like at the end, right? Like, got it. Like,
Mhm.
it's a lot to do, right? But we need to take some extreme ownership with some of those things, right? Like this is, I don't know, and maybe you can speak to this. I don't know if anybody really knows what they're signing up for when they have kids, or when they're getting married. And I mean that respectively, right? Because you learn more about yourself as time goes on. You learn more about your partner, and hopefully there's some healthy communication along the way. Because let's be honest, in some cases, we don't really tell our partners everything. Um, right off the bat, right? Things that we may enjoy, right? If I'm getting a little more detailed, or adult like, if you will. And that can lead to tension, right? And that's kind of where the arguments can happen sometimes, is because we're not communicating. But going back to what you said, it's it's a balancing act. And like I said, I'm kind of going in circles. I don't know if anybody really knows what they're signing up for. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, because I don't think anybody has it all figured out. Um, but I I always think to myself, like, how can this person, or how could I mean, I don't know if they would listen to me, but how can this person help themselves balance everything, if that makes sense? Because it is a lot, right?
Yeah. Well, you do the best you can, and you're absolutely correct. We can't really conceive what it's going to be like because we just don't think of all those various things that happened that we just never even thought about. And but
Oop, hold on, I lost you. I'm getting you back. You're back. You good?
okay, yeah, it's really true for really everything we do.
Yeah,
You know, you just can't. You know, you and what happens is that so often we are having a fantasy about what the future is going to be like, and then here we are spending the moment living in the future in our thoughts. And whether it's a positive or a negative, we're still not being in the moment. And so when we have those positive fantasies and we turn them into an expectation, that's when we become disappointed or even devastated, depending on if it's, we were nowhere close to what we expected. And if we're having the negative fantasies, then we're going to be scaring ourselves, and we're scaring ourselves in the present about something that might happen in the future, but most of the time those things don't happen, and we've scared ourselves unnecessarily. I took my girls to swim practice today, and they wanted to leave at 6:15, and they're it's like a minute or two before, and come on, Daddy, come on, we're going to be late. We're going to be late. It's going to be okay. It only takes 7 minutes to get where you want to go. And we ended up getting there a few minutes early, but they just were devastated because they were telling themselves how they were going to be late, and they're having these negative fantasies, and it was going to be the end of the world. And it's a microcosm of what we do as adults. We have these fantasies, and we either scare ourselves to where we can't move, because fight, flight, or freeze when
yeah,
we're really frightened, and we freeze, or we just set ourselves up for expectations that just cannot possibly be met. And then, even though what we're experiencing is really nice and fun, or could be, we're devastated because it's not. And so, you're right. We really can't know what we're taking on when we take it on. And but we also, the best is just, what I find is when I can stay in the moment and then just enjoy the moment. Don't expect something, just go with the flow. then I don't have any disappointments, and then I can, I can steer it in a positive direction as it's going there. Um, and I have 100% of my energy to deal with in the moment because I'm not dwelling on the past or jumping into the future and trying to imagine what's going to happen. So,
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like it was sometimes I feel like I'm more prepared mentally to handle what may come. And when I say that, I don't mean that I'm thinking about what may happen all the time. Of course, I'm thinking like, well, if I do this, this might happen, right? But I'm not overwhelming myself with it. But I'm trying to make the point that I am very calm and in the moment. Thanks to your tools, and we all know I'm a big extreme ownership person as well. So combining both of them, but then also just experience, right? I been a dad pretty much my entire life. On two occasions, I was unemployed. Two big occasions. The first time Jade was about to be born, and then the second time the boys were here in the midst of a pandemic. So how do I say? I don't worry about work. I'm confident in what I do. I do it to the best of my ability. And if tomorrow came and they were like, "Hey, Ryan, we're closing your department," I've been here before. The only thing I can do from here is figure it out. I can't curl up in a ball and die. Um, but that's experience, right? It's kind of like if you're a soldier and you're in a firefight, the first time you might be like, "Whoa, what the hell is going on?" But as you keep going, you become more poised. You know what to expect. You're familiar with the sounds and the environment, and you're able to survive. Hopefully, if that makes sense.
mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you have past successes that can help you have confidence that you'll be able to get through this because you got through something similar in the past. And, so that helps us to stay in the moment. Unfortunately, what a lot of us do is we have past wounds that we haven't healed, and we're still stuck in the first dimension thinking it's always going to be this way, it's never going to change. Or in the second dimension where we're see that there's a cause and effect, but we're blaming someone or something else. But whether it's the first or the second, I don't have power because either who I'm blaming has all the power or everything out there has all the power because I don't have any. So it's when we learn how to find those fears and shames, disappointments, and then give ourselves that Oreo cat to alleviate them and then take responsibility for our part, that's when we can take ownership of what's going on. And so when you've healed the past wounds, then you're not going to be vulnerable to having the negative fantasies of how this terrible thing is going to happen again. But if you haven't, then you're going to be very vulnerable, and you're going to just, sometimes our fantasies can run away with us. And the sad thing is we don't realize that we are causing that. We are
Yeah,
causing that.
yeah, and I and there's a lot going on in the world right now, right? There has been for the last 2 years, and even though I was saying this to Monica the other day about COVID, it's without getting into the blanket idea and vaccines and mandates and all that stuff. When everything starts to go back to normal, and one day it will, right? It will go back to normal or as close to normal as it can be. I think everybody's going to feel a lot better. I think certain anxieties are going to disappear because would you agree that just the state the world is in, even if we're not thinking about COVID in that moment, there's kind of like this blanket, like this cloud following us, right? And it kind of feeds our anxieties a little bit more. Am I making sense here?
Well, I think, that's where the internet and social media comes in
I know
because we
it's
have
the word.
instant access to all kinds of things that are going on around the world, you know. And if you go back 100 years or 150 years, news traveled a lot slower. And so
Yeah,
you had moments, just had peace and tranquility, and there may be a war going on someplace, not too far away, but
You'll see it
you
on the
you don't
news
know about it,
at
because
6.
you don't hear the cannons being fired, or the shots, and you're just, walking through the woods with the birds and the bees and the animals, and things went slower, and now they're speeding up, and we can have information overload, where we're just taking in so much that we just don't know what to do with it, and that's with social media. Well, we can do the same kind of overload with our own thinking, as well, what if this happens, and then that's going to happen, and then this, and we can just, really stress ourselves out. So,
But it's contagious, right? Like I always feel like anger, and we've said this before, anger is contagious. And I've said this to you before, and maybe I've said it on a few episodes, that that's one of the reasons I don't share news articles and stuff, because I feel like I would be pushing fear and anger back out into the world, and maybe it can end with me, right? I'm sure somebody else would share, but it's one of the reasons I don't do it, because let's say that I share it, right? And Susan, my friend, is in her living room and her kids are going crazy, and she's looking at this article, she's reading it, she's starting to get lost in her negative fantasies, and one of her kids goes, "Mom, mom," and she goes, "What?" Right? And what point I'm trying to make is that it can travel so quickly, and you may project it in a direction you didn't mean to, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. Well, there's two things that are contagious. One of them is fear, and the other is love. And we have a say in what state of consciousness we are going to be in, coming from the fear of what we don't want, or coming from the love of what we want. But not a lot of us realize that we have that mental ability to focus on what we want, even when things are not going, quote unquote, so well. I can still come from the love of what I want, about how, you know, I wonder what this is going to teach me. How am I going to learn from this? How's this going to make me stronger, or, more loving? And, or, oh my God, I can't handle this. This is too much. You know, we have a choice which way we approach something in the moment, or anticipating in the future. But a lot of us don't see that we have that choice. We think the experience is dictating what I'm feeling, and it's really what I'm thinking about the experience. That's what determines what I'm feeling, and then what my attitude is, and then what my experience is.
Yeah. So I have a question, and you don't need to go into any details, but it's a question that just popped up. And you've been running these groups for years. What's group like for the last 2 years? Are people a little more tense? Or is everything kind of just still the same? Are you able to show newcomers how to navigate through their lives and what's going on? I'm just kind of curious because, like I said, I feel like with everything going on, there's kind of just, even if we're able to go through our day to day lives, it's still kind of just like there's this blanket of static emotion, if that makes sense. And like I said,
Well,
I feel like it can trickle down, is what I'm saying.
yeah, I don't know that I would say that it's more or less. See, there's always going to be incidents and traumas that happen to us. What they are changes. And so you have different kinds of traumas that people are experiencing because of how things have grown, or how they've been stifled. And so, and what I find, the way to work effectively is just to be in the moment with the people that I'm working with, so that I can hear, they show me where they are. And then my job is to help them to see what they're showing me, so they can understand themselves better. And so I don't usually try to compare, if things are worse or better, because it seems like there's just always something going on for everybody, and it's
Do you,
just about being in touch with it. It's just different things change.
Do you have to help anybody? And again, you don't have to go in detail, but do you have to help anybody a little bit more, or maybe a few people? Like, I am going back to the day when I was in your group, and I feel like I could see somebody who is maybe facing a very challenging time, um, with their own factors, and maybe they start talking about COVID or something, and then you start trying to help them navigate, but then they go, it's been 2 years of this, John. It's never going to end. It's never going to end. And you have to be like, just relax, and then maybe help them implement the tools. I is there any of that going on? Again, I'm kind of just
Well,
curious if it's
well,
triggering people.
what goes on is what I find that causes people to struggle with the tools is that they come in and they basically want to keep doing what they've always done, because they just say, well, it must be working, and and they want to keep doing, and a lot of times what happens is people are trying to deal with things from an intellectual perspective, and with their thoughts and thinking. And the key to the tools is learning how to identify our feelings. What are our emotions? What are, to identify sadness or disappointment or shame, embarrassment, concern, or fear. Because when we can start to identify those feelings, they show us what we're thinking. And then we can better take responsibility for what we're thinking. And then that changes what we're feeling. So a lot of people that struggle learning the tools, I had someone just recently said, oh, I could read these books all day, every day, and it's not going to change anything in my life. And I said, you know what? I agree with you. If all you do is read these books all day, every day, that's not going to change. It's not the information that is going to change you. It's the implementing of the information, learning how to identify feelings. Because we had struggled, and he had something that he was obviously at least irritated and annoyed about, if not angry, but yet he couldn't find any of the primary emotions that came before it. Because probably very similar to where I used to be before I started doing all this work, the way to cope is to numb out to those feelings so that you don't have to feel them, or as an attempt to not feel them.
Right.
But they're there whether we are conscious of them or not. And if we don't identify them and talk about them, then we end up acting them out in our behavior. That's why when you see kids who are, being disruptive and acting out, there's feelings that are going on for them that they're not able to identify, articulate, and alleviate, or heal. And so when you can sit down with them and find out what's going on for them, and try to direct them into what is it that they're afraid of losing or not getting, or what do they feel sad or disappointed about, or shame or embarrassment. So then they're learning how to talk about those feelings, and then they're able to process through the incident. But if they're not able to talk about it, then they have to act it out. We can act things out by throwing things or slamming doors. We can also act things out by pulling away or ignoring somebody. But the acting out doesn't make the pain go away. Talking about it and then bringing that love, that are you a cat, into that area, that's what alleviates that pain and hurt.
But it's not easy.
No, it's not.
It's not easy to talk about it. It's not and it's not easy, especially if you were if you initiated it, or you were the aggressor, or you had a slip up, right? And sometimes it can be like, well, if you hadn't said that, then I wouldn't have been. But sometimes it's just like, I'm sorry for the way I acted. I shouldn't have done that. And like, even when you're close with someone, right, your spouse, it sometimes can be so hard just to be like, I'm sorry, it was my fault.
Yeah. Well, we all make mistakes, and that includes me. I remember my last mistake 32 years ago.
I was about to say, it was a long time ago.
No, I make mistakes all the time, just like everybody else. The key, though, is when I can identify it and admit it, see, then I can learn from it. It's when I'm denying it and blaming somebody else, like, well, if you hadn't done what you did. see, then I'm not seeing what I need to do to take ownership of how I'm responding or reacting to that person or situation so that I can respond differently and get a different outcome next time. The E plus R equals O, from Jack Canfield, the events plus my response to those events equals my outcome. And we so easily get caught up in trying to change the events. That's other people's circumstances, situations. And we can't control those things, but we can control how we respond to those things. But we don't see that because we're so caught up in being, who we are, that we don't see, the power that we have.
I was saying that to my friends the other day. I was saying marriage, the only place where you could go and you could be discussing the electric bill and who pays it this month, and that discussion could lead to a disagreement all the way down to, well, when was the last time you cleaned a toilet? Or if you parked your car behind mine, then or if you didn't park your car behind mine, then I wouldn't have been it can just lead to, like you said, no one's taking ownership, no one's saying I did this. You just start to go, like, here's the baseball, right? The baseball bat. I keep going up. I'm going tit for tat all the way. And sometimes people just cannot help themselves. And well, and that goes back to what you were saying. If you hadn't done this, if I hadn't done that like 3 years ago, you know what I mean? You can just become so toxic and petty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, see, it's fear, and it's the fear of losing that respect or understanding from somebody else, that acceptance or caring, appreciation or trust from somebody else. If I admit to you that I dropped the ball, you might decide you don't want me to be on your team. So it wasn't me dropping it. It was whoever threw it. That's the problem. They threw it wrong. And that's being stuck in the second dimension of healing, where we give our power away, and regardless of how you threw it, I got my hand on it and I couldn't hold on to it. So, I got to do a better job of, holding on to it when I get my hand on it. And then I'm taking responsibility for my part, which I can control. See, but when I can give myself the "Are you a cat?" that love about the fact that I made a mistake, and have the healthy shame, oops, I made a mistake, then I'm not so fearful of losing that "Are you a cat?" from somebody else. Because when I can't give that love to me, then I'm not turning my love light on. So I'm sitting in the dark of my fear. And then if I'm afraid you're the only one that can turn the light on for me, and if I'm afraid you're going to stop respecting me or stop understanding or accepting me, and you're not going to turn the light on for me, then I'm really going to be in the dark of my fear. See, and so that's what's going on for us, and why we hold on to, blaming someone else, because, we're afraid that we're gonna lose their "Are you a cat?" if I admit that I made the mistake.
Quick question. Maybe it's not a quick question. So we're talking about communication. We're talking about ownership and taking ownership about our actions or what we did wrong. My personal belief at this point in life is that two things lead to couples being unhappy, and one is you're just simply not compatible, which is fine. You figure it out. You both come to an agreement. You move on, and that's that. But then in some cases, it's you really want to make it work, but one of you, if not both of you, are just simply not communicating about things that you may want or things that you're thinking about. And maybe you're afraid or embarrassed to tell your partner, but it could just be solved if people just communicated. But there's a lot of fear that can come with communicating, if that makes sense. And then it leads to the constant tension.
Yeah, because we're afraid that we're not going to be accepted by that other person if we tell them. See, when there's something that I feel shame about, shame is like fungus. Fungus grows really well in the dark. And if you keep something with fungus in the dark, it's just going to keep thriving. That fungus is just going to grow and grow. But as soon as you bring that object out into the sunlight, the light of the sun makes the fungus go away. Well, when we have something that we've experienced or done, and we're so embarrassed and ashamed because we're looking down, judging ourselves, looking down on ourselves about it, we just assume that somebody else is going to. And so we hide it. And so I'm hiding this thing and I'm doing a really good job because you don't see it. And then all of a sudden you give me this really big compliment. Oh, John Anthony, you just did this really, And then I'm saying, yeah, but if you knew this thing that I got grown, this fungus growth here that I got going in the dark here, you wouldn't be thinking that about me. So I'm getting all this "Are you a cat?" gravy from other people, but it doesn't have value because I'm thinking, if you knew the truth, you wouldn't be doing that. See, and that's how when we are hiding those things and not talking about them, that's how we prevent ourselves from getting love, even when somebody else is giving us love, because we aren't giving it to ourselves. And it's really me not accepting what I did and forgiving myself for what I did that makes me think others aren't going to give that to me.
Yeah.
So the other thing though that makes relationships difficult is when we're trying to change each other.
Yeah, that
If
doesn't
I
work. Yeah.
accept you as you are and you accept me as I am, you know, then we're going to have a good relationship because I understand that's who you are and you understand that's who I am. But if I'm saying, if only you would do it this way, or only if you wouldn't say that, or only if, see, when I'm doing that, then what I'm trying to do is to control the event, the other person, in order to get the outcome that I want, instead of just being appreciative of the outcome I get, from because that's who that person is. And then as I respond to it, then when we get the outcome and I enjoy it and make the most of it. So as soon as we start changing each other, that's when uh, relationships can go south real quick.
Yeah. So I on the subject of communication and ownership, and Monica is gonna I don't think she'll be upset, but so she has been working on herself through therapy with her counselor, which is good. We always promote that, right? I talk to
Mm-hmm.
you and I read books, and she does her thing. Uh, but I pointed out to her over the last few weeks that she's what's the word when you're going backwards? Regressing, is that the word?
Uh-huh.
I barely graduated
Mm-hmm.
high school. She's regressing in certain areas, and I have politely communicated when I see these sorts of things happening. So, for example, in the summer, I was trying to put on some muscle, so I was eating a lot of eggs in the morning. So we she bought this like 24 pack of eggs at Costco, and it was in the fridge for quite some time. And we're going through this grocery phase, if you will. We're getting back on track with buying the proteins and all that, and I'll break it down so that we have it and save us money and be more effective because we have 400 people living in our house. But so I was like, "Hey, what are we doing with these eggs? Are you hard boiling them for the boys?" Which is something she likes to do sometimes. I was like, because I was like, "They're not moving, babe. Like they're gonna expire soon." And she said, "Well, you see, the thing is that you go through phases with what you're eating." I was like, "Let me stop you right there." I was like, "Because I know what you're gonna say, and you're gonna say there was the phase where I was eating eggs, and that hasn't happened for months because I just haven't been home in the morning. I don't have time like that anymore, nor do you." Um, but it happened a few more times on the subject of groceries, and then I finally was like, "Babe, you have made strides in your therapy, in your work, and everything you've done, but you're really fighting me on the groceries here, and there's no reason to do it." Uh, and then I politely pointed out something that she agreed with. I was like, "You don't like when anyone gives you any sort of constructive or negative feedback." To which she replied, "You're right. I don't." And I was like, "I think you worked on this, and I think you need to take a step back and kind of work on the tools and strategies again because maybe she needs what do you call it, a tune up? She might need a
Well,
tune up.
she might, but that's real tricky ground that you're walking on there.
I'm walking on eggshells.
Because no, I think you're walking on uh, quicksand. Um, uh, See, nobody likes to be told that they're doing wrong, and what I find is, you know, if you ask a person to tell you what they think they're doing about making progress or regressing, and when they own it, it's going to be a lot better than when I point it out to them.
Right.
So we try to be helpful when we point things out, but sometimes it can cause a reaction by that person where they just deny it, even if it deep down they know it's true, but because it's that reflex, fearful of losing "Are you a cat?" from other people. So, um, you know, so where do you think you are? You know, are you still making progress, or are you having challenges, or what? Where as opposed to I don't know if you're still making progress. You know, because first of all, it's just my perception, and I may be on target or I may be off base, but it's difficult for a lot of people to hear that. So, um,
So how about this though? We've had this discussion as we've both been working on ourselves, and she has openly asked me to communicate in the manner that I did because she feels that she responds better to direct communication, if that makes sense, as opposed to like, hey, babe. So she kind of just like, just give it to me. I'll figure out what to do from there. But she wants to be. I don't want to use this term because I don't think it's healthy, but she wants to be, let's not say called out. She would like for me to address it when I see these things happening, if that makes sense.
to be more direct.
Yes. She doesn't want me to just be like, okay. You feeling okay? Because that's what really drives her nuts, believe it or not. If I go, hey, you all right? That's what really gets her amped up.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I think you know her much better than I do.
Maybe, hopefully.
Yeah, and so there are certain things that some people respond better to than others, and so some people prefer someone to be direct and straightforward, and you know someone else might not. But if she's letting you know that that's what she wants, then go ahead.
That's what works for different strokes for different folks, right?
That's for sure. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I started eating the eggs. I ate a lot of them this week. Made sure that I got the 24 pack. Actually, I think they're almost gone. So I took extreme ownership in that area.
Yeah.
um, but I'll point out just for I guess for to touch base on what we're talking about. So I too was a little overwhelmed with our refrigerator and grocery situation because I felt like there was an abundance of food and we weren't like using it to the best of our abilities. And she openly admits that she needs a recipe and a plan. Where me, I kind of just like to go with the flow, like the show Chopped, literally. Like today, I
Mhm.
had leftovers of um, couscous and broccoli from like Wednesday night or something. No, that's too far back. That's a week ago. Oh, maybe. I think it was Sunday night, and I put it together with the eggs, right? But put some salt, pepper on it. It actually tasted really good. It was a good quick meal, good burst of energy. But she needs a recipe. She needs to know what night she's going to use said recipe. Um, And she will legitimately get like overwhelmed if she doesn't have a plan for executing the process, if that makes sense. So, um, like I said, so there was an abundance of food, and we needed to strategize. And I was like, here, like I was just like, oh my goodness, I just don't even know how to Jenga to Tetris this refrigerator right now. The old me, 2 or 3 years ago, in my dark days, as Monica refers to it, that would have been a text, babe. We have to talk about the grocery situation when you get home. This is out of hand, right? And back then, to me, that would have been like, that's a fine text. I'm not making it a big deal right now. But it is, right? That's contagious. That's a chain reaction. It would have interrupted her time with Jade. So I didn't say anything. And when she got home and settled, because I think that's a terrible thing to do is when somebody comes right through the door, start addressing things.
Right.
So, let her take a deep breath, catch up. And then I was like, okay, we got to talk about the situation in the refrigerator. But going back to the very beginning about what we were talking about, experience with our partner, communication. That from the refrigerator to bringing it up to her is 7 years of experience with one another, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
well, you learn, hopefully, you try things, you see what works and you see what's not working. See, but, you know, someone who can take what's in there and throw it together, with leftovers, that's just one style of how to approach, you know, a subject.
yeah, of course.
Predictability, knowing, the menu, what's going to be needed, that's another style.
Mm-hmm.
And there's
Yeah.
nothing like what one's not right and the other's wrong. It's just about preference, and some people, are more fixed and some people are more mutable, and they like change. And, we just have to find out who we are. And sometimes we're a mixture of the two. There's a part of me that likes things to be dependable and and the same, and then another part of me that likes to change. And so I have to find areas in my life that I can, have both. And or otherwise I'm, going to feel like there's something missing. And you know so that's where astrology comes into play. They help you to see these things. The person who likes change, the person who doesn't like change, in general. And it's very interesting when you bring that into the situation of how you're understanding yourself or how you're trying to understand someone else. So
It's funny. Well, actually, maybe it's fun. I think it's funny. We both laughed about it. Um, so last night I made dinner, and just my style, right? I don't do recipes. I don't really have a plan. I kind of just integrate what I've learned throughout my career and watching Chopped. And I was like, pasta, chop down some red meat, throw some shrimp in there, cream sauce, done. Easy, 10 minutes. And then I made a joke, which she laughed about, and we both laughed about. And I was like, oh, so there's peppers too, by the way, John, and everyone else who's listening. Then these peppers, she used them tonight, but they were bought like a week and a half ago. So that was part of the egg joke, if you will.
mm-hmm.
So last night I was like, oh man, if I had just put some peppers in this pasta, that would have been the end of it. And I was like, ha 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 ha. And she was like, are you kidding me? It takes you like an hour to boil water. All right. So don't be making comments about me and the peppers. And I was like, oh my goodness, I was joking. And then we sat down and we were eating it. And I thought about it and I was like, I don't really have any control over how quickly the water boils. And again, it was a joke and it didn't go any further than that. But she just could not deal with the fact that she hadn't used the peppers yet. She doesn't like to be wrong. She needs her recipe. So today the peppers were executed and integrated into the dinner. But yeah, marriage
Yeah,
can
well,
just be
see,
about the grocery sometimes.
yeah, well, see, and when we have a wound, that we haven't healed, and somebody bumps into it, it's painful. If we've healed it and we've moved past, blaming others or ourselves. We've learned how to feel the feelings, before the anger, the shames, the sadnesses, the fears. Give myself the "Are you a cat?" Take responsibility for my part. Then when you talk about that, I'm going to be able to laugh with you. But if I haven't done all that work to bring that love from me to me about that act or situation, then when you bring it up, I'm going to be feeling, shame because I'm judging myself or thinking you're rubbing it in my face, and it's painful. And that's why, when you have guys who like to tease a lot, you know, you're teasing about something that the person's okay about, it's not a problem. But as soon as you bump into something that they're not okay about because it's still hurtful for them, that's when you get the big reaction, and it's just so quick for it to go to anger, and then they attack back, verbally, emotionally, or physically because of the pain that they're feeling. And it's it's an art to learn how to give that love, that "Are you a cat?" to yourself, because since we've been children, we've been looking for it to come from others. And sometimes we go into the adult world and there's certain areas that we're still not able to give ourselves that love because we are feeling some kind of primary emotion about it. And oftentimes it boils down to fear or concern of losing something or not getting something that we want. And that's when it can become painful. And, emotional wounds don't show like physical wounds. And you can bump into an emotional wound for somebody real innocently. Um, and
Well,
and then it can be a problem.
yeah, well, that's one of the things that my mom always, after doing so many podcasts with me, realizes that I am fascinated by the little things, or maybe the consistent things even, or maybe the consistent little things that we may have encountered at one point in our life that bleeds over into adulthood. And one example would be perhaps there was a family member of hers, and I won't go into too much detail, who would ask her why she didn't catch that ball at softball, or why didn't you make that goal? You had the shot; it was wide open, right? And as parents, we think that we're doing the right things most of the times, or sometimes, when it comes to sports or extracurriculars, and we think we're creating a competitor, and we may very well be creating that competitor. We may be helping them develop that competitive personality, but little do we know that we're also hardwiring the brain to not be pleased when our partner points out that we didn't use the peppers, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Because we made an error or we made a mistake, and nobody wants to make mistakes, but what we all do at various times, and some of us more than others, when we've lost our focus, and we're distracted on what other people are thinking or doing, and we're not able to take responsibility for our own thoughts and behaviors and feelings, then we can make those mistakes more often than not. And so, but trying to learn how to stay in our love for ourselves and others, as opposed to getting caught up in our fear of losing or not getting something. That's the whole balancing act of life. How can I bring more love into my life, or how can I stop bringing all this fear? So,
And it's a workout, right? You got to stay with your regiment. It's not gonna happen overnight. You might have slip ups. You might make mistakes, and to me, if you're somebody who's worked on yourself and you slip, which we do, which I have, which I think anybody who's come a long way does, it's important to remember the tools and or remember how far you've come, and figure out how you can make this moment or this day just kind of pass, and then get back to what you were doing.
yeah, yeah. Remembering the tools is good, and you know having that healthy shame. Oops, I made a mistake. But it's when we can give it from me to me, see, then I'm going to be less vulnerable to possibly not getting it from somebody else or actually not getting it from somebody else. But if I'm not able to give it to myself, then I'm going to be vulnerable if it looks like I'm going to lose it from somebody else.
100%. So as we reach the end of this podcast, it's a good conversation. It often is, but sometimes we just have really good conversations. I thought it was a really good conversation.
Yeah.
We're getting caught up. We're talking about focusing back in, talking about communication, which is right. It seems simple, but like you said, that can be. And I think that was something that that's for another podcast, and I definitely want to talk about it with Monica. Was that we did hit a wall in our adult life, if you will, because there was things in the dark that people were afraid to bring out, and not like murders or anything like that. Anybody, but once we both were kind of like sat down and talked about it as a couple, as friends, as an adult, it was like, wait a minute, you think about things like that too? And she was like, yeah. And literally a new door in our relationship opened. And from there on out, there wasn't that tension, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I've said that a lot this episode. Tension, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, communication is important, and we often associate communication with something we do with somebody else. But really, we need to make sure we're doing a lot of communicating with ourselves. And that requires us to be able to take that time to be with ourselves. Like in the very beginning, when your daughter's wanting to play and it may be that you need to stop or spend 5 minutes to communicate with yourself, and then you'll be able to be there for her. And, recognizing that when we're there is important. I remember years ago when I was I was in the flea market business selling sunglasses, and the person that I was buying them from, I told him, I took a day off, and he said, what do you mean you're taking a day off? I said, I have to let my mind catch up with my body, because they were out of sync. And, he didn't know what I was talking about, but, sometimes we have to let our mind catch up with our body or our body catch up with our mind. But, we need to bring the two of them together, because we can be in this place, but our mind is in another place. So physically I'm here, but mentally I'm trying to do something about tomorrow or trying to fix something about yesterday. And then that's how we become incongruent, and then we're not able to optimize what we do. So
100%. I agree. So I said, if that makes sense, like 100 times in this episode. So that's probably where we end. But John, if you want to give everybody your information as always, how they can reach you.
Well, if you've said that makes sense 100 times, that means we were up to $1.
I like John's jokes. I don't care what anybody says.
Yes. At least John likes them. So you can reach me at contact@supportivealliance.com or www.supportivealliance.com is the website. So check it out. Contact, if you want to find out more about the tools, connect,
communicate.
Yes.
All right, everyone. John, thank you as always. We'll be back here in 2 weeks. And then once I got some editing to do. And then once I edit this, if you're watching, I'll edit this podcast. It'll be available on Spotify, on Podbean, and your favorite podcast outlet. We will see everybody next time. Take care.
Take care. Have a good one.